After my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, the doctor suggested I get pregnant to save him with umbilical cord blood. That night, I climbed into my husband's bed wearing a lace nightgown. He coldly pushed me away. "You're almost 30, and you're still thinking about these things. Aren't you ashamed?" In my sadness, I unexpectedly caught my husband assuring his female student, "Don't worry, I'll get a vasectomy tomorrow. I won't take the risk of you getting accidentally pregnant." It turned out he had given himself to a girl more delicate than me. I smiled as I tossed the diagnosis report into the trash can. Upon receiving my husband Ethan's medical report, I saw the diagnosis clearly written in the results section: leukemia. I couldn't help but feel my whole body go weak. Leukemia is not an incurable disease. Ethan has a rare blood type, and it is already difficult to find a bone marrow donor with the same blood type for matching. Worse still, he is an only child, and his mother-in-law is over 60 and not suitable for donating bone marrow. Since we do not have children, there are no direct blood relatives who can match with him. I trembled as I asked my best friend Lydia if there were any other treatment options. Lydia pondered for a moment and suggested that I get pregnant as soon as possible. The umbilical cord blood of a newborn has a 50% chance of matching with the parents, so rather than waiting for a slim chance with a stranger, it is better to hope for a pregnancy. However, I am currently at a critical period for my promotion, competing with male colleagues in the company for the position of partner in the Asia-Pacific region. If I get pregnant and give birth, in the fiercely competitive private sector, not to mention a promotion and raise, I might even lose my job. Lydia repeatedly asked me if I was ready to sacrifice my entire career for Ethan. I made a quick decision to have a child to save Ethan's life. If I lost my career, I could always start over. Ethan and I walked from campus to the wedding dress, having known and loved each other for a full 10 years. How could I bear to watch him die right before my eyes? After taking a shower, I put on the lace camisole nightgown that I hadn't worn in a long time. I climbed into Ethan's bed in the dark. After 7 years of marriage, in the last 2 years, we started sleeping in separate rooms. In the first 5 years, the seemingly refined and abstinent Ethan demanded quite a lot from me. However, as the pressure of academic research grew, Ethan, a chemistry professor at a prestigious university, often had to leave early and return late to supervise students in experiments. To avoid affecting my rest, he suggested we have separate rooms. To support his career, I agreed without hesitation. Since we were assigned separate rooms, Ethan rarely comes to my room. Out of pride, even when I have needs, I feel embarrassed too. Therefore, the times I've shared a bed with him are few and far between. The few occasions that did happen were when he was drunk and came to find me in a daze. I took a deep breath and reached my hand into Ethan's silk pajamas, feeling his abdominal muscles. Ethan was disciplined and restrained, loved fitness, and was handsome. Even in his 30s, his looks and physique were still top-notch among men of the same age. Perhaps it was because he hadn't been close to me for too long. His tall figure suddenly stiffened. My restless hand moved down, biting his earlobe, and I whispered softly, "Honey, shall we have a child?" Afraid of affecting Ethan's mood, I decided to temporarily hide the bad news of his illness from him. Snap. Ethan reached out to turn on the bedside lamp. The glaring light stung my eyes. He frowned and sat up, coldly pushing me away. "You're almost 30, and you're still thinking about these things. Aren't you ashamed?" I was taken aback. A huge sense of shame almost instantly overwhelmed me. I couldn't understand why Ethan suddenly spoke to me with such harsh words. After 7 years of marriage, he and I had been respectful and courteous to each other, a model couple in the eyes of our friends. Could it be that the pressure from work has made him lose his desire early? Or does he know he is sick and doesn't want to burden me, so he deliberately gets angry with me? I haven't had the chance to think it through. Ethan suddenly pulled me into his arms, leaned down to gently kiss my forehead, and looked down at me to apologize. "I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm going to take a shower to calm down," accompanied by the sound of water splashing in the bathroom. After thinking it over, I decided to be honest with Ethan about his condition. After all, with a malignant disease like leukemia, delaying treatment would greatly increase the probability of death. Just at that moment, Ethan's phone, charging on the bedside table, began to receive several messages, one after another. My ad didn't come on time again. Next time, no more unprotected. Hurry up and get a vasectomy, I don't want to get pregnant before marriage. And I absolutely won't allow you to have children with that old witch, otherwise, your divorce will definitely be messy. Wait until I graduate, and if there are conditions to have children, then we can reconnect, otherwise, I'll punish you by not letting you touch me for 3 months. My heart suddenly tightened. I thought, if it wasn't a student's prank, Ethan was most likely cheating. I looked up at the tightly closed bathroom door. Trembling, I picked up Ethan's phone. After 7 years of marriage, this is the first time I've checked his phone. I never thought he would betray me. I tried several passwords, but none of them could unlock it. I suddenly remembered that in the past 2 years, Ethan had never spent our wedding anniversary with me. I took a deep breath. I entered the date of our wedding anniversary. The phone unlocked. I guess this date is either the girl's birthday or an important day for Ethan and that girl. It turns out he didn't have time to be with me, not because he was busy with experiments, but because he was busy being with another girl. I opened the chat box and quickly scrolled up from the bottom. I skimmed through their chat history, reading 10 lines at a glance. The girl is Shirley, a graduate student hired by Ethan 3 years ago. In fact, Ethan initially did not want to recruit female students. He felt that the majority of female students pursued graduate studies just to obtain a degree to get married, and that they were not as practical or dedicated to academic research as male students. I urged him strongly to admit students based on their grades, to ensure fairness. Moreover, many girls are now much more capable of studying than boys. It was then that Ethan nodded and accepted her. When the students came to our home for dinner for the first time, Shirley specifically thanked me for helping her out. The chat history is filled with numerous explicit private photos that Shirley sent to Ethan. At first, Ethan would coldly refuse her, warning her that he was already married. Until 2 years ago, on our wedding anniversary, Shirley said she had been drugged at the bar, and if Ethan didn't come to pick her up within half an hour, she would leave with another man. I still remember that night Ethan didn't even bother to put on his coat, rushing out the door. He said there was an urgent matter to handle in the lab, and he would come back to celebrate our anniversary with me once it was taken care of. But I waited all night, waiting until the cream cake I made melted, yet he still didn't come home. It turned out he went to the bar to pick up Shirley. Ethan transferred a lot of money to Shirley, with amounts ranging from $5,200 to $52,000. Although he is just a university professor, he holds several chemical patents worth tens of millions, and I never check his spending records, so he is very generous with his red envelopes. But Ethan and I have been married for many years, and we have always managed our own finances. He has never given me a red envelope for any holiday, big or small. With an annual salary in the hundreds of thousands, he doesn't lack for money. Yet, I can't help but feel inexplicably cold inside. The most eye-catching piece of news was that Shirley complained to Ethan in the morning that her period hadn't come this month. Ethan immediately swore to her, "Don't worry, I'll get a vasectomy tomorrow. I will never take the risk of letting you get unexpectedly pregnant. I won't let your teacher's wife get pregnant either, I haven't touched her in a long time." My hand holding the phone kept shaking. It turns out that in these 2 years, Ethan has given himself to girls more delicate than me. He was even afraid of them accidentally getting pregnant and took the initiative to suggest getting a vasectomy. But when I was with him, he always made me take the pill. Click. The sound of the bathroom door lock turning echoed. I slid the chat box to the left, marked it as unread, then turned off the screen and quickly put the phone back in its place. What's wrong? Lost in thought? Ethan walked out of the bathroom, drying his hair while looking at me. I snapped back to reality. She looked up at Ethan and awkwardly shook her head. It's nothing. Since you're not interested, I'll go back to my room and sleep, I won't disturb you. I got up, put on my slippers, and was about to walk out of the bedroom. But suddenly, Ethan behind me pulled me back sharply. I was startled. I was thinking about what reason to use to refuse Ethan. I just heard him say, "I have an appendectomy scheduled for tomorrow, so I need to take a day off." "You're busy with work, so you don't need to come and keep me company. I'll have my graduate students take care of me." But Ethan had his appendix removed back in middle school. This was something his mother told me, and I definitely didn't remember it wrong. But I didn't want to expose his clumsy lie. I just gave a low hum in response. Since he wants to get a vasectomy for another girl, then let him do it. Seeing me agree so readily, without the usual nagging and reminders, Ethan seemed a bit unaccustomed. His deep-set eyes fixed on me without blinking, as if trying to see right through me. "Why are you so distracted tonight? Is there something you're hiding from me?" I felt inexplicably guilty, afraid that Ethan would see through me. Just as I was thinking about how to cover it up, Ethan's phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the screen, quickly hung up the phone, his expression somewhat unnatural. "A spam call." Immediately, he coldly issued an eviction order. "You should go back to your room and sleep early." I hurriedly nodded, secretly relieved, and returned to my own room. The next day after work, I had just returned home when Lydia called me. Her tone was particularly serious as she bluntly asked me, "Do you know that Ethan secretly went to the hospital to get a vasectomy?" I just finished reading the medical records. After the sterilization surgery, it will take at least 6 months before it can be reversed. If it can't be reversed in time, or if the reversal fails, you and Ethan will be completely unable to have children. Don't forget, Ethan's condition can't be delayed for long. At most, there is only a year. Hearing this, I smiled faintly, deliberately crumpling the health report in my hand and casually tossing it into the trash can. My tone was calm, without a hint of disturbance. "I know." Lydia still wanted to ask me something. I heard the sound of the password lock unlocking and hurriedly hung up the phone. The next second, the door was pushed open. Shirley was seen affectionately supporting Ethan as they walked in. The two were shoulder to shoulder, chatting and laughing, taking advantage of the excuse of caring for the injured without any reservations. Seeing me, Shirley's smile instantly froze, and she awkwardly said, "Hello, teacher's wife." Ethan explained to me somewhat awkwardly, "Girls are more attentive and take better care of patients than those few mischievous boys." "Huh, I think he wants Shirley to see him get sterilized so that she can be completely at ease." I didn't say anything, lowered my head and smiled, deliberately kicking over the trash can. The crumpled medical report rolled to Ethan's feet. Ethan glanced down at the crumpled paper on the ground, furrowing his brow as he asked me, "Why didn't you tell me the results of the physical exam were out?" I broke my usual demeanor and cried as I threw myself into Ethan's arms, sobbing, "Honey, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" Ethan's body suddenly stiffened, his gaze instinctively darting towards Shirley. Shirley pressed her lips tightly together, her face filled with displeasure. "Huh, she really has a strong possessiveness over someone else's husband." Ethan impatiently pushed me away, eager to distance himself from me. "Let's talk nicely. What kind of person cries and whines in front of the students?" He pushed too hard, and I stumbled back several steps, almost falling. Shirley held Ethan's hand tighter, as if to assert her claim, softly scolding me, "Aunt, you are being too reckless. The teacher just finished surgery, and you suddenly rushed over like this. What if you touch the wound and it opens up? I really don't know how you usually take care of the teacher." I ignored her provocation and, with a panicked expression, covered my stomach. With a thud, a pregnancy test stick fell out of my pocket. The 2 red lines, one dark and one light, were particularly eye-catching. Shirley's face suddenly turned pale. The hand that had been tightly holding Ethan's arm slowly loosened, and she unconsciously took a step back, her voice trembling. Mistress, the good news you mentioned, it wouldn't be that you're pregnant, would it?" I gently nodded. She forced out a smile that was uglier than crying, tinged with a sobbing tone. "Well, congratulations to you and the teacher." I ignored her and looked up at Ethan, but I was not surprised to meet his icy gaze. "Nina, can you stop messing around? How long has it been since we? I interrupted him in shock. Did you forget? A month ago, on the night of my birthday, you got completely drunk and came into my room. For the past 2 years on my birthday, Ethan has treated it like a task, handing in his assignment every time. Ethan rubbed his forehead, looking annoyed. Get rid of it. I've drunk so much and taken medication, the sperm quality must be poor. This child can't be kept. I glanced at the pinhole camera in the corner, covered my face with my hands, and with all the acting skills I had, I cried out in grief and anger, Ethan, do you really not want this child? Do you know how long I've been hoping for this child? If I say no, then it's no. If you insist on staying, then let's get a divorce. Every time we argue, Ethan threatens me with divorce to make me compromise, as if he knows I can't live without him. A hint of smugness flashed in Shirley's eyes as she feigned concern and advised me, teacher's wife, don't be too sad. The teacher makes a lot of sense. Just think about it, with both drinking and taking medicine, if you were to have an unhealthy baby, how much harder it would be for you and the teacher. I ignored her, wiped my tears fiercely, lifted my face, and stared at Ethan, asking, do you really think so? What if I said I have leukemia and need this child to save my life? Ethan was extremely impatient and shouted at me, don't you understand the concept of selective breeding? Wanting to have a child who is very likely to have defects, that's not love, that's extreme selfishness and extreme irresponsibility. Can you stop being unreasonable? I was so angry that my whole body trembled, and I raised my hand to slap him. If you don't want children, then why don't you wear a condom every time? Why can't you control your lower body? Who is the selfish one, you or me? Perhaps he never thought that I, who usually have a good temper, would take action, and Ethan was taken aback. Shirley rushed forward and stood in front of Ethan, her voice trembling with tears. Mrs. Teacher, how can you hit the teacher? If you don't care about Teacher Zhou, I still care about him. Without thinking, I slapped Shirley again, and you, don't you see what you are? What right do you have to meddle in my and Ethan's private matters? Who do you think you are to him? A free bed warmer? Shirley froze for a second, covering her face as she threw herself into Ethan's arms, crying pitifully, Teacher, I'm so scared. How could the teacher's wife spread such a rumor? If she doesn't welcome me, I can just leave. Ethan was completely enraged by me, roughly pulling me towards the door. Look at you, what's the difference between you and the shrews on the street? Get out of my house. Go file for divorce tomorrow. Huh. His home. The down payment for this house was indeed made by Ethan's mother, but the mortgage has always been paid with our joint savings, and now it has become his home alone. Seeing that I was unwilling to leave, Shirley stood in the doorway and pretended to say, Madam, you should leave quickly, don't upset the teacher anymore, it's not good for his injury. I will help persuade the teacher. The way she carried herself, it was as if she were the mistress of the house. After I mentally gave this play a perfect score, I turned and looked at Ethan with pity, saying each word slowly, remember, it was you, Ethan, who firmly didn't want this child, not me. Don't you dare regret it. By the way, you can check the medical report for the bad news yourself. Hearing this, Ethan's action of closing the door suddenly paused. Before he could react, I slammed the door shut with force and walked away without looking back. If it weren't for the fact that my period didn't come this morning and I unexpectedly found out I was pregnant, I wouldn't be playing along with their ridiculous melodrama out of fear of being morally blackmailed. Now that I've said everything I needed to say, whether Ethan is dead or alive has nothing to do with me anymore. I hailed a taxi and headed straight to Lydia's house, planning to go to the hospital for an abortion first thing tomorrow morning. Anyway, with the disclaimer in hand, I won't have any second thoughts. As I expected, early the next morning, Ethan and his mother blocked me and Lydia at the hospital entrance. Along with them were Shirley and several well-known figures from marriage mediation shows. They held up the camera, the lens pointed straight at me. Right in front of everyone, the gray-haired grandmother suddenly knelt down with a thud, sobbing as she did so. Nina, please, I beg you, don't let a little quarrel with Ethan make you stubborn enough to get rid of the baby. This child can save Ethan's life. Back then, it was my mother who was confused and didn't agree to Ethan marrying you. But Ethan is a sentimental kid, he didn't mind that you were an undergraduate. To be able to marry you, he actually knelt for 3 days and 3 nights. Grandma paused, wiped her tears with her calloused hands, and continued to cry out, over the years, Ethan became a professor, while you are just an employee in a private company, but he has never looked down on you. How could you bring up divorce right after he was diagnosed with leukemia, and even cruelly terminate the pregnancy? Aren't you just watching a mother send off her son in his prime? In just a few short sentences, you've turned me into a selfish, heartless woman who abandons her sick husband. That's right, Ethan is a doctor, and his education is much higher than mine, I admit that. But during those 5 years of his master's and doctoral studies, all the financial pressure at home was borne by me, who had just graduated with a bachelor's degree. I unhesitatingly gave up the civil service position I had worked so hard to obtain and chose to work at a private company with a higher salary and greater work pressure, all in order to earn more money to support his education. Only I know how hard those days were. And what was the result? My desperate efforts led to his high education, which instead became the reason my mother-in-law looked down on me. The heat in the live broadcast room suddenly surged. Many clueless netizens began to maliciously speculate about me. TSK. In my opinion, this child definitely isn't her husband's. She insisted on getting rid of the child while her husband was seriously ill. There must be something fishy going on. I think there's an 8 or 9 out of 10 chance she's cheating, hoping to inherit the family fortune and keep a young lover after her husband dies. They say a woman's heart is the most poisonous, and it's really not an exaggeration at all. Seeing the opportunity ripe, Ethan walked over, frowning as he pulled his mother-in-law. Mom, let's not beg her. Yesterday she deliberately forced me to bring up the divorce, she is determined not to save me. Shirley hurriedly stepped forward to hold her mother-in-law's hand and said confidently, yes, Professor Ethan is a key research talent for the country, overseeing several research projects that determine the future direction of the nation. The country won't sit idly by, we really don't need to ask her. As soon as Shirley said this, the live stream exploded, and the netizens' insults towards me became even more intense. Is this woman a spy? Deliberately trying to harm Professor Ethan, maybe she just wants to hinder the country's scientific progress. Is there anyone who can dig up her background? The more you think about it, the more terrifying it becomes, and even a rough thought is frightening. People like her should be arrested and thoroughly interrogated. Who knows, she might have already been bought off by foreign forces. If she doesn't donate, we'll donate to Professor Ethan. Count me in. I'm also willing to donate to Professor Ethan. I looked at the 3 of them who were singing in harmony with curiosity. Last night I recorded in advance, originally to counter their moral coercion, for me to have a baby and donate umbilical cord blood to Ethan. But now it seems that Ethan doesn't care at all whether I donate or not. If it weren't to force me to save Ethan, then what is the purpose of this act? Is it purely to have netizens attack me? Lydia also looked at me with a puzzled expression. Both of us knew that the probability of Ethan successfully matching with a stranger for a bone marrow transplant was extremely low. But the 3 of them acted so confidently and fearlessly. I haven't had the chance to think it through. Ethan's cool gaze turned to me as he handed over a divorce agreement. You can divorce and have an abortion if you want, as long as you're willing to leave with nothing. I will never morally bind you to save me. The house was bought with my mother's down payment, and over the years, my financial contribution to the family has been much greater than yours. The so-called marital property is mostly what I've earned. You stood by and did nothing while I was in trouble, so there's no reason for you to take my money. It turns out this whole act was to use public opinion to force me to leave with nothing. I shook my head. I won't sign. I'm not the one at fault, so why should I leave with nothing? Ethan frowned and said coldly, not signing? Then we'll see each other in court. The grandmother, who had been kneeling, suddenly erupted in fury, standing up and pointing her finger at my nose, scolding me fiercely, you shameless one. Not willing to divorce and also unwilling to save my son, are you waiting for my son to die so you can swallow the family fortune and keep a man on the side? Shirley feigned a sigh. "Madam, you and the teacher are at least husband and wife, can't you be a bit more magnanimous and let Mr. Zhou go?" Watching the three of them sing in harmony, the more I thought about it, the more I felt something was off. Even if Ethan loves money to the point of obsession, how could a dying person possibly refuse a chance to live and insist on forcing me to leave with nothing? Something is definitely off. At the same time, the disdain for me in the live stream reached its peak. I really have no words, it's like no words have opened the door to no words. I've never seen such a selfish and self-serving woman. She's really trying to push Professor Ethan to his limits. Brothers, let's go to her workplace together and report her, making her pay for her actions. Zhongshan First Affiliated Hospital, right? I'm heading over to deal with that promiscuous woman. In an instant, a thought flashed through my mind. There is only one reason that allows them to be so fearless. I rushed forward, grabbing Shirley's hair, and with all my strength, I slapped her hard. Perhaps she didn't expect me to act in front of the camera. Shirley was caught off guard and fell heavily to the ground, her stomach hitting the steps in front of her. She anxiously covered her belly and cried out loudly, "It hurts. Ah Chuan, it hurts so much, my child." The old lady rushed over to protect her, cursing at me without restraint, "You dog of a daughter. If anything happens to my grandson, I won't let you off." As I expected, Shirley is also pregnant. This is the reason they are so fearless. Ethan was enraged by me, instantly losing his reason, his face turning pale as he grabbed my neck. Lydia rushed over to intervene, but he threw her aside, and she fell heavily to the ground. He was like a wild beast out of control, raising his hand to slap me and roaring, "Apologize to Shirley right now. Who allowed you to hit her again and again?" When I publicly exposed his infidelity, his fierce and ugly face was fully revealed, completely losing the calm demeanor he usually maintained. I was choked to the point of suffocation, my whole body went limp, completely unable to resist. Suddenly, a warm liquid flowed out from below, and when I reached down to touch it, my hand was covered in bright red. Seeing my blood, Ethan's raised hand suddenly froze. He let go of me, took a step back, his figure swayed, almost falling to the ground, murmuring to himself, "What have I done? What have I done?" The popularity of the live stream instantly exploded, attracting over 100,000 onlookers. What's going on? Why am I so confused? Isn't that Shirley Professor Ethan's student? How could she be pregnant with Professor Ethan's child? Is this a performance? This script is just too ridiculous. So the scumbag is the one who cheated? Wow, this mother-in-law is really disgusting. Just now, she was pretending to be pitiful, but it turns out she has been helping the mistress and her son plot against the daughter-in-law, trying to force her to leave with nothing. Seeing that the time was right, Lydia immediately pulled up the video I sent her last night from her phone and started playing it in front of the camera. My best friend cried to me after getting her husband's medical report, saying that even if she had to give up her job promotion opportunity, she would get pregnant to save her husband. As for why she was determined to have an abortion later, please watch the video. Ethan rushed forward to grab the phone, but was restrained by the security guard who came to maintain order. Meanwhile, Shirley and I were also lifted onto the stretcher by the medical staff. Ethan's face was pale as he shouted at his mother-in-law, "It's all your fault for meddling. You insisted on making Nina leave with nothing. If I can't keep both kids, I'm done for." The grandmother, however, held her neck high and refused to admit her mistake. "Just find another woman to have a child with. There are women everywhere, it doesn't have to be children born from just the two of them. I had a sterilization surgery, Mom. It will take at least 6 months to reverse it and have a child. I won't live to see that time. Did Nina trick you into doing this? Let's accuse her of conspiracy to commit murder and get her sentenced to death." Ethan's face turned pale. "It's not her, she doesn't know at all, it's Shirley." The mother-in-law was so frightened that her legs went weak, and she collapsed to the ground. "Son. Don't scare your mother. Your mother is still waiting for you to take care of her in her old age." At this moment, the live stream was just showing the scene where I was kicked out of the house by Ethan. Netizens are outraged. What the hell? This man forced his wife to have an abortion for his mistress, kicked his wife out in the middle of the night, and even hit his wife for the mistress. No wonder his wife won't donate umbilical cord blood to him. If it were me, I wouldn't donate either. Scum like him doesn't deserve to live. The plot twists are off the charts. The man slaps her, and the green tea bitch of a mistress gets 2 slaps. She destroys someone else's family and dares to enter and provoke the legitimate wife, urging her to have an abortion and to divorce and leave with nothing. Now she's getting her comeuppance. My innocence has been proven, and I can rest easy as I faint on the stretcher. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I saw Ethan and his mother, looking haggard, waiting at the door of the hospital room. Lydia blocked the doorway, rolling her eyes in anger, and rudely shouted at them, "Why can't you two understand human language? You have to stand here and disturb the patient's rest? Hurry up and get lost. Shirley's child couldn't be saved, and now she knows to come to Nina to plead? Where was she earlier? It's too late to say anything now." Seeing that I was awake, my mother-in-law's eyes flashed with a hint of urgency, and she squeezed her plump body into the hospital room with all her might. Ethan shamelessly followed behind her. Grandma walked to the bedside, opened her backpack, and took out box after box of food. While crying, she pretended to say, "My daughter, I've made so many of your favorite dishes, except for the crabs you love the most. Crabs are too cold and not good for pregnant women." I felt a wave of nausea and immediately turned over, not wanting to look at them at all. Ethan hurriedly moved to the front of my bed, changing his expression to one of utmost gentleness. "Nina, didn't you really want to keep this child before? So why not keep it?" I chuckled and said, "Don't. You were right before. I shouldn't be so selfish, knowing that the child might have problems and still thinking about bringing them into the world." When the grandmother heard this, her face turned red with anxiety. Oh dear. Can the angry words spoken during a couple's quarrel be taken seriously? A day as a couple is worth 100 days of affection. You and Ethan have been married for 10 years, your feelings are so deep. Can you really bear to watch Ethan die? He was willing to cheat and set me up to force me to leave with nothing, almost causing my social death. What else do I have to hold on to? Ethan lowered his head, remained silent for a while, and suddenly raised his hand, slapping his own face hard. "Wife, I was really wrong to an outrageous extent. Only now do I realize how much you love me. To save me, you were even willing to give up your job. I truly am not worth anything. I was such a jerk before, but I will definitely change from now on. I will spend my whole life making it up to you. Shirley and I were just playing around. I swear, I will never do it again," he said, and with a thud, he knelt in front of my hospital bed, took out the album of us, and stuffed it into my hands. "Wife, please forgive me, you are the one I want to spend my life with. I promise, I will completely cut ties with Shirley. In the past, she was the one who actively seduced me. Regarding her academic misconduct, I have already reported it to the college, and they will definitely expel her. I will absolutely not give her another chance to cling to me, nor will I let her disturb our lives again. I certainly know that he is not truly remorseful. After all, I asked him that night, what if I had leukemia and needed this child to cure me? What did he say? Not to be selfish. If the person who is sick is really me, I'm afraid he would have already packed his bags and divorced me to marry Shirley. I didn't hesitate to throw the album that recorded every little moment of my relationship with him into the trash can, and said with a cold smile, "Ethan, you don't just know you're wrong, you know you're about to die." Then, I took out the divorce agreement that I had prepared long ago from under the pillow and handed it to him. "Sign it, half of the property for each of us. You are the one at fault, and if this goes to court, you definitely won't get half." My mother-in-law saw that I had made up my mind and started cursing in the hospital room. She accused me of being shameless, claiming that I must have a man outside, which is why I was so determined to divorce her excellent son. They also scolded me that the child in my belly must be a bastard, so I dare not give birth, fearing it would expose my infidelity. Ethan silently watched his mother go crazy, not intervening at all, just like countless times before, benefiting from his mother's madness at my expense. As a lofty university professor, he would naturally not lower himself to do such undignified things. Lydia directly called the police and drove them away. Ethan refused to sign the divorce papers, so after my abortion, I filed for divorce directly. Seeing Ethan again was at the court hearing a month later. Ethan looked even more haggard, his complexion as pale as paper, and he had lost a lot of weight, walking with a slight wobble. In court, lawyer Ethan listed various reasons, emphasizing that the down payment for the house was made by Ethan's mother, and that Ethan had made significant contributions to the family's finances, requesting the judge to consider these factors in the property distribution. My lawyer directly presented the various expenses I incurred for Ethan during his master's and doctoral studies, as well as the bills I have paid for the family over the years, proving that my contributions are no less than Ethan's. The most damning evidence, of course, was the video shot by the dating blogger that Ethan's mother found. That video not only proved that Ethan had an affair during our marriage, but also that he wanted to force me to leave with nothing through improper means. Ethan clearly became the biggest culprit in the failure of this marriage. The judge directly awarded me 60% of the marital property. Ethan was not satisfied and filed an appeal. While waiting for the second court hearing, Ethan kept running back and forth between the courthouse, school, and hospital. Yet, despite being clever all his life, he just couldn't understand it at the moment of his death. He is a critically ill patient, and the most precious thing is time. The thing that cannot be delayed is also time. And I have plenty of time to spend with him. However, before the second hearing could take place, an accident occurred in Ethan's laboratory. It was orchestrated by the resentful Shirley. After being expelled from school, she couldn't find a job due to her notorious reputation and didn't dare to ask her family, who favored sons over daughters, for money, so she could only turn to Ethan for help. Ethan hated her for forcing him to get a vasectomy, causing him to lose the last bit of hope for survival, not willing to help Shirley even a penny. Shirley once obtained a laboratory key with Ethan's indulgence. So, she secretly sneaked into the lab and, while Ethan was conducting experiments with his students, prepared a high concentration of perchloric acid, and then, filled with resentment, smashed that vial of perchloric acid towards Ethan. Laboratory explosion. Shirley and Ethan were both severely injured and admitted to the intensive care unit. Their bodies were burned, with not a single patch of healthy skin. Their consciousness was sometimes clear and sometimes hazy. When I went to the hospital to visit Ethan, I happened to see his grandmother handing him the divorce agreement, her voice choked with tears. "Son, listen to your mother. While you are still clear-headed, sign this divorce agreement. You must not let that heartless woman take more of your money." She was anxious as fire. Because if Ethan died without getting a divorce, according to the law, most of the inheritance would fall into my hands, and what I could get would be far more than the 60% the judge would rule. To be honest, I don't covet this extra inheritance. After all, Ethan is really close to death. But I didn't expect that, despite Ethan's extreme weakness, he still tried to shake his head at his grandmother, his voice weak yet firm. "No. I won't sign." The grandmother, seeing this, became even more anxious, constantly murmuring in his ear, trying to persuade him. However, in a moment of clarity, Ethan used all his strength to ask the nurse for paper and pen. With trembling hands, he wrote a will, leaving the majority of his estate to me. He looked at his mother-in-law and said weakly, "Mom. I'm sorry for Nina, I'm sorry for the child I never had. I don't blame her for not saving me, I deserve this. I ruined the relationship we had for so many years. In fact, I didn't want a divorce, I wanted to see her a few more times through the lawsuit. I know I was completely wrong, but this was the only way I could have a reason to intersect with her again." Grandma looked at Ethan in disbelief, both angry and anxious, but at this point, Ethan was too weak to respond to her. Before long, Ethan's condition deteriorated rapidly, and he passed away. After receiving Ethan's will, I felt no emotion at all. Instead, I immediately saw through his schemes. Before he died, he deliberately left 10% of his inheritance to me, not because he said it was out of love, but because he wanted me to mistakenly believe that he still loved me, thus making me feel guilty for not saving him and keeping my conscience uneasy for a lifetime. In fact, inheriting 10% more or 10% less of the more than 30 million in inheritance does not have much impact on my quality of life. I will not foolishly remain trapped in the past and guilt as he wishes. I have rightfully inherited the vast majority of Ethan's estate and have smoothly become a partner in the Asia-Pacific region of the Leia Group. With a patent inheritance of 30 million, the annual interest alone is 1,200,000, plus my annual salary of 500,000. I can eat whatever I want, buy whatever I want, and if I'm in a bad mood, I can immediately fly to Europe to see the pigeons. I have no husband, no children, but I have my best friend by my side, and money to spend as I please, along with a career I can strive for. After becoming a widow, my life is moving in the best direction.